Riker Ackerley, born in 1988, to wealthy parents in Greenwich, Connecticut. Riker grew up with the kind of privilege that often breeds entitlement. Former classmates from his prestigious private school described him as charming, but calculating, someone who could talk his way out of any situation. His father, a hedge fund manager, died in a boating accident when Riker was 16, leaving him and his mother with a substantial inheritance. His mother, struggling with grief and alcohol dependency, largely withdrew from his life, leaving Riker to navigate his teenage years with minimal supervision and abundant financial resources. By all accounts, Riker excelled academically, graduating from Yale with a degree in economics. He quickly established himself in the insurance industry, building a reputation as a skilled broker who could close seemingly impossible deals. However, beneath his professional success lay a pattern of interpersonal manipulation that would later become evident to investigators. Former colleagues at Meridian Insurance Group recalled how Riker maintained multiple phones and had an uncanny ability to keep track of elaborate lies. His executive assistant, Beatrice Morton, told investigators that he kept detailed spreadsheets of his conversations with different clients, ensuring he never mixed up his stories. She had assumed this was just exceptional customer service. What no one knew at the time was that Riker had already left a trail of broken relationships across Connecticut. 3 women from his past eventually came forward after the incident, describing similar patterns of deception and manipulation. Each believed she was in an exclusive relationship with him, only to discover he was simultaneously involved with others. In 2019, Riker made a strategic decision to move to Millbrook, a smaller town where he could establish a satellite office for his insurance business. The move, investigators would later conclude, was calculated. The town's size, around 3,000 residents, was small enough that he could become a notable figure, but large enough that people in different social circles might not regularly cross paths. Within months of his arrival, Riker purchased a luxurious colonial-style house on the outskirts of town and became active in local business organizations. He cultivated an image of a successful but down-to-earth businessman, making strategic donations to local causes and attending community events. The stage was set for what would become his most ambitious, and ultimately fatal, deception. Autumn Thorne was exactly where she wanted to be in life when she first met Riker Ackerley. At 32, she had transformed the struggling Millbrook Public Library into a vibrant community hub through innovative programs and modern technology integration. The daughter of Leopold Thorne, a respected local judge, Autumn had deep roots in the community and a quiet confidence that came from knowing her place in it. Their first meeting occurred in March 2021, when Riker visited the library to conduct research for an insurance seminar he was planning. Autumn would later tell Detective Hawthorne that what struck her most was how Riker seemed genuinely interested in her work. He asked thoughtful questions about library science and digital archiving, topics that usually made most people's eyes glaze over. According to library security footage, that first conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. Riker returned the next day with coffee for both of them, and what Autumn believed to be a serendipitous love story began to unfold. He told her he spent most weekdays traveling for work, but always made time to see her on weekends and Wednesday evenings, which she assumed was when he arranged his schedule to be in town. Their relationship progressed with calculated precision. Riker met her father, Judge Leopold Thorne, 3 months after they began dating. The judge, known for his strict evaluation of his daughter's suitors, was impressed by Riker's business acumen and apparent devotion to Autumn. In his personal diary, later recovered by investigators, Leopold wrote, "This young man could be the one for my daughter." There's something refreshingly old-fashioned about how he courts her. By December 2022, Riker had proposed to Autumn during a weekend trip to Vermont. The ring, a family heirloom he claimed had belonged to his grandmother, was actually purchased from an antique dealer in Boston, a fact that would later emerge during the investigation. Autumn began planning a traditional church wedding at the Millbrook Chapel, scheduled for June 15, 2023. Her colleagues at the library noticed a change in her during the engagement. The typically organized and level-headed Autumn became more distracted, often checking her phone and making wedding-related calls during work hours. She confided in her assistant that while Riker's busy travel schedule was difficult, she believed it would ease up after their marriage when he planned to focus more on his local office. What Autumn didn't know was that many of those business trips were actually spent less than 2 miles away, with another woman who was also planning her wedding to Riker Ackerley. While Autumn Thorne represented old Millbrook money and tradition, Sage Winters embodied the town's emerging artistic spirit. Her cafe had become the go-to spot for the town's younger crowd since its opening in 2020. At 29, Sage had built her business from scratch, after inheriting a modest sum from her grandparents, turning a defunct hardware store into a trendy establishment that served artisanal coffee and homemade pastries. Riker first walked into the Wild Sage on a Tuesday morning in April 2021, just weeks after meeting Autumn. According to the cafe's security footage, he spent nearly 3 hours there, ostensibly working on his laptop. He returned every Tuesday and Thursday thereafter, always during the mid-morning lull when Sage typically handled the counter alone. To Sage, Riker presented himself as a workaholic trying to escape his home office. He claimed to be a consultant who worked remotely for international clients, explaining his irregular hours and frequent unavailability. He told her he preferred to work from her cafe because the creative atmosphere helped him think, and, he would later admit, because her smile brightened his day. Their romance blossomed over quiet conversations during slow business hours. Sage later told investigators that Riker always seemed to know exactly what to say. When she mentioned wanting to expand the cafe, he offered detailed business advice. When she shared her insecurities about being a self-taught baker competing with formally trained pastry chefs, he praised her innovative spirit. Unlike his approach with Autumn, Riker kept his relationship with Sage more private. He explained that as a business consultant, discretion was crucial for his professional reputation. This conveniently justified why they rarely attended public events together, and why he preferred intimate dates at lesser-known restaurants in neighboring towns. The proposal came in January 2023, a month after he had proposed to Autumn. He surprised Sage after closing time at her cafe, getting down on one knee among the empty tables. The ring, which he claimed was a contemporary piece from a Paris jeweler, had actually been purchased from an online retailer. Sage began planning an outdoor wedding at Riverside Gardens, coincidentally scheduled for the same day as Autumn's ceremony. As the wedding approached, Sage's best friend and cafe manager, Phoenix Rivera, noticed subtle inconsistencies in Riker's behavior, but dismissed them as pre-wedding jitters. What none of them realized was that Riker was orchestrating an elaborate performance that would soon reach its devastating finale. The level of detail in Riker Ackerley's deception would later astound even veteran investigators. A search of his home office revealed a complex digital calendar system with color-coded entries, multiple phones labeled with different aliases, and a notebook filled with meticulous details about both women's lives, preferences, and daily routines. Riker maintained his double life through a carefully structured schedule. Mondays and Thursdays were devoted to Sage, under the guise of working from her cafe. Wednesdays and weekends belonged to Autumn, who believed he was in town only on those days due to his business travel. Tuesdays and Fridays were his buffer days, which he spent actually working and maintaining his insurance business, while using these days to create alibis and manage any unexpected situations. His phone records revealed an intricate system of call forwarding and automated messages. He maintained 3 separate phones, one for each fiancé and a business line. Each phone had carefully curated contact lists, photos, and text message histories. He even used different email addresses and social media accounts for each relationship, with varying privacy settings to prevent any overlap. The parallel wedding preparations presented the greatest challenge. Riker claimed to both women that he wanted them to have their dream weddings without his interference, using this as an excuse to remain largely uninvolved in the planning. He convinced each that his mother was too ill to attend, eliminating the risk of that potential complication. There were several close calls. In March 2023, both women happened to visit the same florist on the same day, missing each other by mere minutes. The florist, Dahlia Chen, later recalled feeling confused about the similarity of the groom's name, but dismissed it as coincidence. Another near discovery occurred when Sage's wedding photographer accidentally double-booked with Autumn's ceremony, but caught the error before any connection was made. Perhaps the most dangerous moment came in May 2023, just weeks before the wedding. Autumn and Sage both attended the same local business networking event. Riker, who had planned to escort Autumn, fabricated a last-minute business emergency. Through text messages recovered from his phones, investigators found him frantically coordinating with both women throughout the evening, ensuring they remained in different parts of the venue. The wedding preparations themselves required exceptional coordination. Riker had scheduled Autumn's traditional church ceremony for 11 a.m. at the Millbrook Chapel, while Sage's outdoor ceremony at Riverside Gardens was set for 2 p.m. He planned to claim a business emergency during Autumn's reception, slip away to change, and arrive at Sage's ceremony with enough time to complete both weddings before either reception ended. Detective Hawthorne would later find a notebook in Riker's office detailing his post-wedding plan. He intended to tell each wife that his job required him to travel every other week, allowing him to split his time between 2 households. He had already purchased 2 separate houses under different LLC names, located in neighboring towns. What Riker couldn't have anticipated was how a simple coincidence would unravel his entire scheme in a matter of minutes on the morning of June 15th. June 15th, 2023, dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for both an indoor church ceremony and an outdoor garden wedding. By 9 a.m., both venues were buzzing with activity. At the Millbrook Chapel, Autumn was getting ready in the bridal suite with her bridesmaids, while across town, Sage was having her hair done at Riverside Gardens' preparation room. The cascade of events that would expose Riker's deception began with something as mundane as a coffee run. Phoenix Rivera, Sage's best friend and maid of honor, stopped at a local coffee shop to pick up breakfast for the bridal party. There, she encountered Autumn's cousin, Blair Thorne, who was wearing a formal dress and carrying a garment bag. The two women, who knew each other casually through local business circles, exchanged pleasantries. Blair, excited about her cousin's wedding, mentioned how happy she was that Autumn was marrying Riker Ackerley. Phoenix, holding a tray of coffee cups, froze. She asked Blair to repeat the groom's name, thinking she must have misheard. The next 2 minutes of conversation would set in motion the day's tragic events. Phoenix immediately called Sage's sister, who was with the bride. Meanwhile, Blair, sensing something terribly wrong, rushed back to the Millbrook Chapel. Both women made frantic phone calls, and within 30 minutes, members of both wedding parties were frantically searching social media and making connections. At 10:15 a.m., less than an hour before the first ceremony was to begin, Riker arrived at the Millbrook Chapel, unaware that his deception had been discovered. He was intercepted in the parking lot by Judge Leopold Thorne, Autumn's father, who had already confirmed the terrible truth through his legal connections and a quick background check. Security camera footage from the chapel's parking lot captured the confrontation. The judge can be seen approaching Riker, who initially smiled and extended his hand in greeting. The smile vanished as Leopold began speaking. Witnesses reported hearing raised voices, with Leopold demanding explanations and threatening legal action. Meanwhile, Sage had already left Riverside Gardens in Phoenix's car, heading toward the chapel. Her arrival coincided with an increasingly heated argument between Riker and Judge Thorne. Multiple witnesses described the chaotic scene as both families converged on the chapel grounds. Security footage shows Sage emerging from the car in her wedding dress, while Autumn, having learned the truth from her bridesmaids, ran out of the chapel's front doors. Riker, now confronted by both brides and their families, attempted to back away toward his car, still trying to talk his way out of the situation. What happened next would be pieced together from multiple witness statements and the chapel's security cameras. Judge Thorne, a man described by colleagues as normally even-tempered and rational, lunged at Riker. In the ensuing scuffle, Riker pulled out a concealed handgun, a detail that would add another disturbing layer to his carefully planned deception. The presence of the handgun transformed an already volatile situation into a lethal one. According to witness statements, Riker's hand was shaking as he pointed the weapon at the gathering crowd, demanding everyone stay back. Judge Leopold Thorne, despite his daughter's screams, continued to advance toward Riker. Autumn's mother, Victoria Thorne, would later testify that her husband appeared to be in a state she had never seen before, a combination of blind rage and protective instinct. The respected judge, who had spent decades upholding the law, was now watching his daughter's life crumble before his eyes. What happened next occurred in a matter of seconds, though witnesses would later describe it as if time had slowed down. Riker, backing away from the advancing judge, stumbled on the curb. The gun discharged. Judge Leopold Thorne collapsed, shot in the chest. In the ensuing chaos, several of the wedding guests, including 2 off-duty police officers, rushed toward Riker. Sage's brother, ex-military, was the first to reach him. Security footage shows Riker raising the gun again, but before he could fire a second time, 3 men tackled him. During the struggle, a second shot rang out. The gun had discharged again, this time striking Riker himself in the neck. The following moments were captured in fragmented emergency calls to 911, with multiple panicked voices reporting shots fired at a wedding. First responders arrived within minutes to find Judge Thorne bleeding on the chapel steps and Riker unconscious on the pavement. Both brides, still in their wedding dresses, were being held back by family members as paramedics worked. Despite immediate medical attention, Judge Leopold Thorne was pronounced dead at the scene. Riker Ackerley, having sustained a severe gunshot wound to the neck, was rushed to Millbrook General Hospital, where he died during emergency surgery 2 hours later. In the midst of the chaos, Autumn and Sage found themselves sitting together on a bench outside the chapel, both in their wedding dresses, both in shock. A responding officer's body camera captured a brief moment when Sage reached over and took Autumn's hand, a gesture of shared trauma and understanding that would later become symbolic of the tragedy's aftermath. The events at Millbrook Chapel made national headlines, not just for their shocking nature, but for the question they raised about how one man's deception could go undetected for so long in a small, close-knit community. As one wedding guest later told reporters, what's most terrifying is that until the very end, he thought he could talk his way out of it. He never stopped trying to manipulate the situation, even with a crowd of witnesses and 2 brides standing right in front of him. The 2-month investigation that followed the Millbrook tragedy revealed layers of deception that went far beyond the double wedding scheme. Detective Hawthorne's team, assisted by digital forensics experts, uncovered a labyrinth of carefully constructed lies that painted a disturbing picture of Riker Ackerley's true nature. The first breakthrough came when investigators cracked the encryption on Riker's third phone, one that neither Autumn nor Sage knew about. This device contained communications with a woman named Valencia Reyes in Worcester, Massachusetts. Valencia, a pediatric nurse, had also been dating Riker for 6 months. Text messages revealed he had been laying the groundwork for another potential wedding, telling Valencia he needed to wait until next year due to his mother's illness. Riker's mother, Cordelia Ackerley, finally broke her decades-long silence about her son when investigators tracked her to a luxury retirement community in Florida. In a 6-hour interview, she revealed patterns of manipulation that began in Riker's childhood. He had learned to pit his parents against each other for gifts and privileges, maintaining elaborate lies about school and friends. By age 12, he was running complex schemes, convincing each parent that the other had agreed to various permissions and purchases. The financial investigation proved especially illuminating. Forensic accountants discovered that Riker had been operating a sophisticated pyramid scheme through his insurance business. He had been using new client premiums to pay for both weddings while maintaining the illusion of successful business ventures. Over 20 clients had been defrauded of nearly $2.3 million, money that he had masterfully shuffled between various accounts and investments. Perhaps most chilling was the discovery of Riker's personal journal, hidden in a wall safe behind his home office bookshelf. The journal, spanning 5 years, revealed a man who viewed relationships as strategic games. He had developed a scoring system for his deceptions, awarding himself points for successfully maintaining multiple relationships and navigating close calls. The final entries focused on what he called the ultimate challenge, the double wedding scheme. Former colleagues from Meridian Insurance Group came forward with new information during the investigation. His executive assistant, Beatrice Morton, revealed that Riker had been collecting detailed information about the personal lives of wealthy clients. Information that investigators now believe he was planning to use for future blackmail schemes. The digital forensics team recovered deleted files from Riker's laptop, showing he had been researching countries without extradition treaties. Travel documents indicated plans for a trip to Venezuela, scheduled for 3 weeks after the wedding date. Investigators believe he may have been planning to disappear with the fraudulent insurance money, leaving both wives behind. Another disturbing discovery came from Riker's weekend house in the Berkshires, a property unknown to either bride. There, investigators found a fully equipped surveillance room with monitors showing feeds from cameras he had installed in both women's workplaces. He had been monitoring their movements and interactions, ensuring his elaborate schedule would never fail due to unexpected visits or meetings. The investigation also revealed that Riker had been seeing a psychiatrist under an assumed name. Dr. Eleanor Blackburn, breaking confidentiality after his death due to public safety concerns, shared session notes describing a man who viewed emotional manipulation as an art form. He had spoken proudly of his ability to maintain multiple lives, referring to himself as a conductor orchestrating a symphony of deception. These revelations would later form the basis for a FBI case study on relationship fraud and financial exploitation, using Riker's methodical documentation of his own deceptions as a template for identifying similar patterns in other cases. The study would eventually help law enforcement prevent several similar schemes across the country, though none quite as elaborate or tragic as the double wedding deception of Millbrook. The investigation that followed would reveal the full extent of Riker Ackerley's deception. Detective Kai Hawthorne and his team discovered that beyond the 2 weddings, Riker had been setting up an elaborate post-marriage life. He had secured 2 separate houses under different LLC names, established separate bank accounts, and even created detailed cover stories for his planned absences from each household. The handgun recovered at the scene proved to be legally registered to Riker, who had obtained a concealed carry permit 3 months before the wedding day. This detail particularly disturbed investigators, suggesting the possibility that violence had always been a contingency in his plans. The Thorne family had lost not only their future son-in-law to deception, but their patriarch to violence. The courthouse where Judge Leopold had served for over 2 decades established a scholarship in his name, helping law students who planned to focus on family law and victim advocacy. Sage Winters initially closed the Wild Sage Cafe, unable to face the constant stream of curious onlookers and reporters. However, 3 months after the incident, she reopened with help from the community, including Autumn Thorne, who had become an unexpected friend through their shared trauma. The investigation also uncovered 3 other women in different parts of Connecticut who had been involved with Riker during his relationship with both brides. Each came forward with stories of elaborate lies and manipulation, though none had progressed to engagement. One of these women had even been house hunting with him a month before the planned weddings. Although Riker Ackerley's death prevented any criminal prosecution, the investigation into his insurance fraud scheme continued posthumously. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit recovered approximately $1.4 million of the stolen funds, which were returned to the defrauded clients. Had Riker survived, Prosecutors estimated he would have faced multiple felony charges, including fraud, theft, and involuntary manslaughter. Instead, his legacy remains as a case study in elaborate deception and its tragic consequences.